The following is a short video going over how security and security settings are handled within Counterpoint. When we talk about security in Counterpoint, there are really three things that come into play that affect what a user is able or allowed to do. And those three things are their system security code, their menus that they have access to, and their point of sale security. The starting point for discussing system security is to go to Setup, System. We will look at users. And I will pull up an existing user. And as I mentioned, there are three factors that are really going to affect what this person is able to do in Counterpoint. And you'll see here, when we create this user, we can choose a security level, system security, that affects your overall things that you can do within Counterpoint. And then on the right side, we have our point of sale security, which affects what kind of things we can do within point of sale. I'd also mention the menu codes. The menu codes are tied to system security code. And I'll just go into one here. If I go into edit the sysadmin, you'll notice that here's this menu code. And that's the other thing that really affects what someone's able to do. So when we as LPA, when we are first setting up or training our users, we will typically create or make use of three levels of security. And you can see those here. Sysadmin being the highest level, point of sale being the lowest level, and then that MGR, that manager level, that's in the middle. And in my trainings, typically, there's not much discussion about the sysadmin user, because that's typically access to everything. Usually, there's not a lot of discussion about the point of sale user, because usually that's the least amount of access to behind the scenes or back office functions. And if there are any conversations, it's usually dealing with the manager role and deciding what level of permissions or ability to access functions in Counterpoint that they have. And everybody differs a little bit as to how much ability or not ability the manager level might have. Now, these are three levels that we start with. We can have as many layers or as levels as we want in Counterpoint. I like to start with these three, see how far we can get. If we need to add on to these, we always can. So if I'm creating a brand new user, once I've created the user, I'm heading down to here and I'm choosing one of these three levels. Now we're going to go another step here and show you what's behind that button. Typically, if I was creating a brand new user, you wouldn't have to go into this level of detail, but we're going to look at this now. I will go over from here. I will go to Setup, System, Security Codes, and we'll go look and see what's behind this. So for starters, we'll look at the highest level, sysadmin. And again, when you choose a security code, you're also choosing the menu code. So when you choose your system security code, you're choosing the menu, and that just means what's over here on the far left. So I, as a sysadmin, I'm going to see a lot of choices there. For a point of sale user, they're going to see a limited number of choices. In terms of the choice boxes here for the security code, not a surprise for sysadmin, you're going to see pretty much everything's checked, right? So things like, am I allowed to enter costs? Am I allowed to view costs? Am I allowed to use other locations, other stores? There's something called sys administration, which is some behind the scene things like setting up passwords or being able to send messages within Counterpoint. And then we have some things that have to do with unlocking stations. On the authorizations tab, you'll notice there's a whole bunch of checkboxes here. The parts of this that usually people care about are down here in the bottom left when we talk about reports. And these are things with, if you've done report training, you know that you can save parameters for a report. You can edit those parameters. And there's also choices about if you're allowed to email a report. That's what these are all about. The right side here under customizations, this has to do with the ability you have to make changes or customize features within Counterpoint. Things like the columns or the filters when you're in certain maintenance forms. In this case, again, as a sysadmin, not a surprise. They're allowed to do these different things. They're allowed to make changes. They're allowed to save those changes. The last portion here worth talking about is the credit cards. And you'll notice that for sysadmin, we have a lot of ability to override things like the AVS. Again, sysadmin, not a surprise. They're allowed to do these things. As a general rule, we no longer check the box for manually authorized credit cards, simply because in this day and age, no one picks up a phone anymore and calls a credit card processor to get authorization over the phone. And so we do not check that. We do not want people doing manually authorized. That gives them the false sense of they got the money and they really didn't. So we no longer check that box. Transaction dates, this is where you can limit how far into the future or into the past you can go when you are, let's say, posting a receiver or posting an adjustment. For a sysadmin, it's fairly wide open. They have a 12-month range forward or backward. And then lastly, we have a tab for time cards. Now with time cards, this is a sysadmin. They may be allowed to clock in, clock out, but it's not required. So that's a very quick glance as to the system security codes for the highest level. Now we'll go look in the opposite extreme, and we'll look at the point of sale user. And again, pretty typical for a point of sale user, they probably are not allowed to enter costs. Most likely they don't view costs. And typically they're going to be limited to their location, their stores, not a system administration. We do tend to leave this on for unlock other stations. This is simply because if someone is at the front counter, they go off for their break or their lunch, and then the 15 minutes times out and that station locks, we really do want anyone to be able to unlock that station. Otherwise, we're going to be down a register until that person comes back from break. So pretty common that all users would be able to unlock stations. For authorizations, you'll notice, again, very different from the sysadmin. Everything pretty much is not checked. The only exceptions I see here are with our emailing. Pretty common that even a limited user would be able to email. And this is because from point of sale, you might be emailing invoices or emailing receipts, and we need these checked for that user to be allowed to do that. For transaction dates, again, opposite of a sysadmin, we're not allowing them to go into the future or into the past when they're posting. However, this is probably a moot point because chances are on their menu codes, they probably don't have access to inventory adjustments or receivings or other features. So the fact that we allow or not allow this probably doesn't matter so much. And if we are using Counterpoint time cards, then you have this option here whether or not someone's required, and you can show their status, whether they're clocked in, clocked out. And if they're leaving Counterpoint, you can prompt them, remind them to clock out at the end of the day. Lastly, we'll look at these settings for manager. And again, this is where if there's going to be conversations and training, this is usually the point at which those conversations come up. And it's conversations about how much ability or access would you like your managers to use. Most folks that I train err on the side that their managers really are empowered to do practically all the functions within Counterpoint. And that's simply because if you're an owner, do you really want to call on Saturday morning because a manager is being blocked from doing something that they need to do to take care of a customer or take care of an employee? So again, everybody gets to make these choices as to what a manager is allowed or not allowed to do. In my example, this is leaning pretty much towards the side of what the sys administrator had. You can see things checked there. Here we're only going 1 month into the past or into the future. And for time cards, yes, allowed, but not required. So that is just a little bit on the system security codes. When you might be thinking about that is you are creating or editing a user. And by making this one choice, all those choices we saw in the background, those are the things that are going into that. Now, I will say, if I'm creating a brand new user, I don't have to go through all those checkboxes, of course. It really is a simple create user 99. Number one, chances are I'm going to copy from an existing user because that will save me a bunch of time. In this case, maybe I'll copy from an existing manager, test manager, test manager 2. And you can see that just these two choices, what I put here for system security and what I choose over here for point of sale security, that's really going to affect or determine what this user has access to. So again, I don't have to go through all those checkboxes. We set those up at a system level. And at the time of creating a user, I can copy from an existing user and away we go. That's the end of this first video for just a brief glimpse into setting up system security. The next video, we will talk more about the menus, and we'll have a third video to talk a little bit about point of sale security.